Hello everyone, thank you so much for joining me for this video. If you are watching on our YouTube or Rumble channels, if you don't mind, if you would just subscribe to those channels, I really would appreciate it. And then also, if you would share that with 1,000 of your closest friends, that would be fantastic. As always, you can read, watch, or listen to our content. And so you're watching the video. I'm about ready to do a podcast for you, and so you can listen to it as well. And then, of course, you can read what I'm going to share. And so if you go to our website, in fact, you're looking for the title of this article is When the Parent's Anger Complicates the Life of the Child. And so when the parent's anger complicates the life of the child, you can read, watch, or listen to it. And so I want you to benefit in whatever way that works best for you. And then, of course, please share our content with everyone. Let me jump into this podcast. The angry heart does not have to direct its frustration toward anyone to complicate their relationship. All the angry person has to do is stand in the vicinity of those who receive the spillover of their anger. Whether you're mad at someone or you're just intoxicating the room with your frustration, it will damage your redemptive goals with the casualties, especially those folks whom you love the most. Every partner, every parent, every pastor, every peer must learn to bring sinful anger into the submission of Christ, or it will complicate the lives of others. In the context of this resource that I'm developing for you, I am talking about how our anger can complicate the lives of our children. Hello, everyone. This is Rick Thomas. You're listening to the Life Over Coffee podcast. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode. If you want to read, watch, or listen to this resource, I would love for you to do that. What you're looking for on our website is this title, When the Parent's Anger Complicates the Life of the Child. And you can read every word that I'm about to share with you. You can listen to the podcast embedded in the article, and of course our video is embedded as well. When Biffy came to me, he was your typical 8-year-old child. In fact, his parents brought him to me because they wanted me to counsel him through his anger issues. Biffy is that kind of kid who laughs a lot, he plays a lot, and then like with all of our children, he gets in trouble a lot too. Unfortunately, it is the getting in trouble part that seems to be causing all the problems in their home. And so I had to meet with Biff and Mabel to talk about this, and we connected at our local Starbucks to talk through some of the parenting challenges with Biffy. Now, while they were more interested in Biffy's wrongs, I wanted to start in another place. And it is important that you hear this, not just hear this, but I also want to make sure that you don't move too quickly into about what I'm about to share with you, because most parents who bring a troubled child in for counseling are not thinking this way. But I knew that parents of rebelling children often focus too quickly on the disruptive child while bypassing an essential step in the ongoing family problems. Though all angry people are primarily responsible for their anger, meaning in this case, Biffy's anger, he is primarily responsible for it, it's not uncommon that these angry kids in this illustration, that they receive help in becoming angry. Now that is especially true with children. And so in counseling parlance, what we call this are shaping influences that impacts a child's early development for good and evil. I've shared before in other podcasts and articles that I have written that as a 15-year-old kid, I was in jail. I was a very angry teenager. And as I have said, I had assistance. I had help in getting there, primarily through my parents, my father and my mother. Now, I am not in any way placing primary causal on them for the reason that I was angry. No, they were secondary causal agents, but it would be intellectually dishonest to say that there aren't shaping influences, especially in an angry child's life. In Biffy's case, it would be virtually impossible for him to go from 0 to 8 years of age. Just in my case of going from 0 to 15 years of age and being an angry kid and not having help. But again, we have primary and secondary responsibility. And so we don't want to jump in either ditch by saying it was all my fault or none of my fault. That there is a primary cause, in this case it's Biffy, and then there is a secondary cause, in this case it is Biff and Mabel. And so I know that a great starting point and helpful way to think about this type of counseling case, problem solving in the home with an angry child, is to answer a few questions about the parents' lives and their marriage. And so I ask them about them. And again, you want to move slowly, carefully, and cautiously as you bring up this concept, because in most cases they will not be prepared for it. And what I wanted to really know is how they particularly relate to Christ and how they relate to each other. If you have disobedient children, how would you answer these 5 questions that I asked Biff and Mabel? Perhaps talking about them with your spouse or talking about them with a close friend would serve you well. Maybe it would be an excellent opportunity, a leadership opportunity to change and grow. And though you don't want to forever hang out on the log in your eye, the humble truth seeker will spend time there first, examining the log in their eye before they go speck fishing. And so here are the 5 questions that I asked Biff and Mabel. Number 1, how would you describe your relationship with the Lord? I wanted to know vertically how each of them were doing in their relationship with the Lord. Question number 2, how would you describe your spouse's relationship with God? I wanted the other spouse's opinion about their spouse's relationship with the Lord. By the way, if you're not able to talk through these questions with a couple, then you probably already have your answer. Because if they're not humble enough, vulnerable enough, transparent enough, honest enough, objective enough to talk about their own relationship with the Lord and talk about each other's relationship with the Lord, well, there is some kind of problem in that marriage. Question number 3, how would you describe your relationship with your spouse? And so I moved from vertically, how's your relationship with the Lord, to horizontally, how is your relationship with your spouse? And then number 4, how are you practically living out these relationships inside your home? Meaning your relationship with God and your relationship with your spouse, what does it look like practically in your home? And then finally, question number 5, how is your spouse practically living out these relationships inside the home? And so it's a time for humble examination of your spouse so that you can be an encourager and truly helpful with your relationship with your spouse. And again, if a couple is not able to answer these questions, then it will give you an indication of some of the dynamics that ultimately you will have to address at some point. But let me circle back for clarity's sake, because it is essential to remember that no parent is the cause of a child's misbehavior. But it's also critical not to overlook how parental behavior shapes young hearts. Parents are like an engine to a car. And if you can follow my metaphor here briefly for just a moment, a properly functioning engine will make it run optimally, but if the engine is defective, the vehicle cannot meet the designer's intent. And so if you want your home to run biblically at optimal levels, you must address the engine first. In this case, you must address what's going on with the parents, their relationship with the Lord, their relationship with each other, because if the parents are not right with God, if the parents are not right with each other, whatever biblical advice and instruction that you provide or that they provide for their children, it will not ring true. And though children can become God-centered, Christ-centered, and biblically guided adults, despite their parents' lack of biblical modeling and biblical assistance, you don't want to take for granted that parents do not matter in a child's life. Children have ingrown baloney detectors, and they can tell when their parents are full of baloney. It will be harder for them when they are younger, but by the time the child is 8 years of age and older, they will be able to tell if the parents are actually modeling the message they're trying to inculcate into the young child's life. Every child from a dysfunctional home will viscerally lament how they long for their parents to love them and to love each other and to provide a secure environment in the home that is conducive for nurturing growth. You can just talk to these kids who are now adults, and they will tell you how they wished their home modeled what I am describing here. And so by unpacking the parents' relationship with God and with each other, you will gain insight into the car's engine and also the car's functionality. A counselor's mindset cannot be suspicious or it cannot be cynical. You don't want to be that way. But a type of biblical discernment that understands the doctrines of hermeneutiology, the doctrine of sin, the doctrine of anthropology, the doctrine of humanity, that is essential. Are they doing all that they can do to help their child to grow up into Christ's likeness? Now, it would be best if you unearth all that needs addressing to help a family become biblically whole. And when it comes to a rebellious child like Biffy, your initial objective is to understand his primary shaping influencers, which are Biff and Mabel. And so you move cautiously into this conversation, and hopefully you will be able to have it. Now, again, if you can't have this conversation with Biff and Mabel, well, then it's going to be a harder row to hoe at this point, because it will be difficult to help Biffy because the parents are truly complicating the situation. And so after spending a few moments with Biff and Mabel, it did become apparent that they were angry parents. They were immediately reluctant to accept my assessment when I first brought it up. I get this reaction often when addressing angry hearts. Many Christians do not have clear-headed, biblically derived definitions of sinful anger. Some of them play down their anger, or they rationalize or justify or blame it away as though more minor sins have lesser impact on little hearts. It doesn't. Some believers have been angry for so long that they cannot see or hear themselves anymore. But I assure you that their children, they can see, and their children can hear what is going on in the parents, even though the parents, their impulse may be to dismiss or not even recognize their own sinful anger. Now, mercifully, Biff and Mabel wanted to learn about what I was learning about them. They cautiously listened as I walked them through the anger spectrum. By the way, if you haven't seen our anger spectrum, I would encourage you, there's a link here inside this article that I'm sharing with you. You can go to our shareable graphics and look for the infographics. There's over 100 of them, like 125 infographics. But one of those is the anger spectrum. It may be the most popular infographic on our website. And in that infographic, it gives a listing of many manifestations of sin that James called murder in James chapter 4, verses 1 through 3. But as I went through the anger spectrum with them, it revealed many behaviors that characterize how they related to each other and also how they related to Biffy. Now, I've listed a few of the angry words that we teased out that did not initially fit their impulsive and narrow interpretation of anger. The list that I'm about to share with you is not exhaustive. It just touches on a few sins of anger that Biff and Mabel commit. And what I would love for you to do is I roll through this list that you listen and see how many of them describe you, either episodically or as a pattern. Perhaps it would be helpful to take a look at the anger spectrum, the infographic, to gain a broader perspective on the many manifestations of anger. But here are a few of those manifestations that Biff and Mabel were humble enough to say, yeah, we do that sometime. For example, impatience, frustration, slander, dismissiveness, irritation, bitterness, condemning, criticism, gossip, aggravation, apathy, self-righteousness, stubbornness, lecturing, exasperation, hand gestures, raising the voice, rolling of the eyes, huffing under the breath, and the silent treatment. Now, that's not everything that's listed on the anger spectrum, but these are some of the ones that Biff and Mabel were able to identify about themselves. And again, James just took one label and put the word murder on all of those that I just listed for you. And so as we continue to delve into how their anger manifests in their home, it did become apparent that Mabel, for example, is an overworked stay-at-home mom. Mabel manages her anger as it leaches out only in a few episodes during the week. She is tired during her waking moments and rarely rests while sleeping. I started sheltering in place in 2003. We were well ahead of the curve on that matter. But when I came home in 2003 and living in a 24/7 relationship with my wife now as a stay-at-home mom, I was just really shocked at how difficult it is to be a stay-at-home mom. And so when I say that Mabel is an overworked stay-at-home mom, that is an understatement that any stay-at-home mom realizes. But even so, Mabel was humble enough to recognize that she has episodic bouts of anger that does leach out. And of course, with Biffy being the primary receiver of that anger, it has an adverse effect on his soul. Alternately, Biff is an unfulfilled, overworked production worker. He's discontented, or as he knows now, he's an angry man who has not found his niche in life. He works to live, a utilitarian view of work that stirs longings for something more spectacular than a rote 9-to-5 existence. During their week, there are many times when their anger comes to the surface. The most apparent time is when Biffy messes up something, which points to Biff's dissatisfaction with his life. He feels as though he missed his calling, but he could not come up with anything when I pressed him on what his calling should be. Both of them miss the connection between Biffy's anger and their discontentedness. They also did not see how their patterns and their episodes of anger worked together to complicate what was happening in Biffy's soul. The family was in a sin cycle that looped from an angry kid to angry parents and back again. And because they compartmentalized their general state of anger, they missed this interconnectedness that I'm describing to you, of how Biffy's anger was connected to Biff and Mabel and how it was complicating everybody's life. Thus, when Biffy pushed their buttons and Biff and Mabel reacted harshly to him, they never addressed their sinful buttons as they worked with Biffy about his anger. When two or more individuals are in this type of sin cycle, they must not compartmentalize what is happening, or they will embrace the victim-centered construct that will only perpetuate the dysfunction. When both people are angry and they embrace the victim-centered construct, where one person is always and perpetually the victim and the other one is always and perpetually the sinner, you can see they will never be able to resolve their conflict because they're not seeing the real interconnectedness of their sin patterns and how they are affecting each other. What Biff and Mabel began to see is how that Biffy is a people pleaser, and there is nobody in his life that he wanted approval from more than his parents. Thus, when they reacted in anger toward him, it amplified his soul noise, and because he was immature, he could not process it biblically. And so he acted out. Hence, the sin cycle was running rampant in their family. Biffy didn't have the biblical categories or the word fluency. He didn't have the ability to be able to articulate or to wordsmith exactly what was going on inside of him, so he could only act it out in anger, the frustration that was being pressed down in him. When Biffy was younger, he was more optimistic about pleasing his parents. He thought he could meet their expectations. Today, he is more exasperated than hopeful, which is part of the reason that he acts out. Biblically speaking, what I am talking about is the fear of man that has captured his heart. Biff and Mabel are only learning how their angry hearts, even if they are not directing the anger toward their son, is perpetuating anxiety in him. As I was saying at the top of this podcast, that even if you're just throwing up in the middle of the room with your anger and not directed toward any person in particular, all the people within vicinity of that anger are being affected. The mantra is this: fussy parents make insecure children. Kids in these homes do not know how to process what their parents are doing except to internalize it. For example, fear through insecurity internalized, or they can externalize it, which would be anger, by acting out. Either way, some kids will internalize it and grow in insecurity and fear. Other kids will externalize it and they will grow in anger by acting out. In Biffy's case, he externalized his internal hurt by acting out in anger. The ongoing anger patterns are piling on. The ongoing anger patterns of the parents are piling on Biffy's pre-existing Adamic insecurities, what I'm calling fear of man. Insecure lives need stability from the adults in the room to help settle their timid souls. Biff and Mabel are complicating their son's life. Biffy has spent many years walking on eggshells, hoping not to displease them. Today, he's at a place of giving up. Fortunately, the light came on for Biff and Mabel. Their humility opened the door for God's favor, which effectuated the beginnings of change. They became acutely aware of what they were doing to Biffy. Even though not directed at him, their general state of anger, due to their respective immature relationships with God, put their son in a vulnerable position. It complicated his pre-existing fear of man. When you mix a people pleaser, Biffy, with angry parents, Biff and Mabel, the insecure acceptance addict, Biffy, will be on edge, never knowing if he has the angry person's approval. Biff and Mabel will have to hold their culpability and Biffy's responsibility in the proper tensions. They were piling on to his pre-existing problems, making it impossible for them to help him. They were disqualifying themselves from helping their son redemptively. Their fear-based boy lives in the defensive, continually tightening up or shutting down as a matter of self-reliance, self-preservation. His approval drive was so strong that sometimes he would even lie about what he was doing because he was scared of how his parents would react to him. He could sense in moments of tension that the wrong response meant disapproval, hence the lying. He erected a wall through deceit to protect himself from the rejection, which is the idol that he craved. Do you see the complicatedness of sin and how it can pretzel the mind to where people who want to love each other stay frustrated with each other? These complexities added layers of complication that circumvented any possibility of grace-filled conversations that led to redemptive, transformative results. Now, there are many steps to wholeness that will take Biff and Mabel years to accomplish. But with a well-placed trajectory and accomplishable goals in view, the first thing for them to do is to recognize and to own their anger. That is the first thing, their heart's general state and how they episodically respond to their son. Now, my point here is not to discourage anyone who is beginning down this path, but it is a call to sit down and to count the cost so that the early disappointments do not defeat the long-term hope that we have in the gospel. It's important to understand that it has taken years to get to this place in their relationship with their son, 8 years specifically. And though it won't take 8 years to work through this, it won't take 8 months either. Some people who come to us really want that quick fix, and even though they realize intellectually that it's going to take longer than they had hoped, when it comes to practically living that out, they can become frustrated and impatient. And so in counseling, what we call Biff and Mabel is a complicating problem. They have been piling on to a pre-existing issue with Biffy. To help their son, they must rein in their anger. It's not helping. Most succinctly, they have to repent. As they begin to understand what is happening inside their hearts, they can begin to identify and to isolate the idolatries that are tempting them to become angry. Their anger is not because of Biffy messing up, but their anger is because of something is broken in their unique relationships with God and perhaps each other. And many times you'll find brokenness in both places. Though they will not have a perfect home, they could have a repentive home, which is always the goal. Some things are not right in their souls, so they must begin vertically with God, not horizontally with Biffy. And so they have to start in this direction, not horizontally. At some future time, they need to talk to Biffy about their anger and what their plans are to change. Biffy needs to hear them owning something that he already knows about them because he has an ingrown baloney detector. He knows what's going on. They need to put words to it so they can walk him through it. It will go a long way to diffuse the tension in his heart if he has assurances backed up by measurable changes as they recognize their part in the family problems. The rule of thumb is that the sphere of the offense and the sphere of the confession should be similar. Biff and Mabel must admit the sphere of offense, the sphere of transgression, and then they must confess those things to all the offended parties, which includes God and Biffy. In addition to owning and repenting of their sins, Biff and Mabel must go beyond their confession, which includes putting on a new kind of behavior. Their anger, or what you could say is their form of communication, has been demotivating Biffy. Now they can do the complete opposite by putting on a new behavior. They can motivate him, not demotivating him through anger, but motivating him through, like, say, encouragement. They can be encouragers. They can identify evidences of the Lord's grace in Biffy's life. When Biffy does something right, they can identify it, they can isolate it, and they can let him know that he's doing something good. They want to be encouragers more than discouragers. This is moving from angry sin that demotivates to putting on Christ's likeness, which motivates. Biffy will be cautious of the changes in his parents' life, which is okay. Part of his apprehensiveness will be because of the residual fear of them becoming angry with him. He has been trained that this is what's going to happen. And so Biff and Mabel must realize that their repentance does not mean that their son will be equally repentive and receptive to his new parents, at least not in the beginning. And they also need to know that their repentance will not be perfect. They are going to blow it from time to time because the angry heart does not disappear like flipping on a switch. But the assured future failure, the assured future failure will provide the perfect context to prove their seriousness about changing. When Biff and Mabel get angry again, and they will, their repentance will prove their seriousness about change and the power of God's grace in their lives. As they live out this penitent state, they can come alongside Biffy to help him overcome his life-dominating sins, specifically with the fear of man, which is at the heart of his anger issues. There should be a softening of Biffy's heart within a few weeks. The rule of thumb is that you're looking for the presence of change, not the perfection. And so hopefully you'll begin to see the presence of change in Biffy's heart as you see the presence of change in Biff and Mabel's heart. The title of this podcast, the article and the video that I just shared with you is When the Parent's Anger Complicates the Life of the Child. For those of you who are interested in an excellent marriage book, I have written one, and it's called Get Ready. If you type Get Ready in Amazon, Rick Thomas, Get Ready, this book will come up, and you can order this softback version of it. There's a couple of hundred pages here, I think. Yeah, a little over 200 pages. And like with all of my books, there's a call to action at the end of it. I would encourage you to get this book, Get Ready, to help you in your marriage. And then it will begin to have a residual effect also in your family. When parents' anger complicates the life of the child. Thank you for watching the video, listening to the podcast. And if you won't read the article, please jump on our website and do that.